Commander Vexthar woke up in pain. His body felt wrong. He tried to move his arms, but only 3 of his 6 limbs responded. The others were gone, cut off, lost in battle. The room around him was white and clean. Medical equipment beeped softly. The air smelled strange, like chemicals and something else he could not identify. This was not a Krillian medical facility. The walls were too bright. The equipment looked different. He turned his head and felt anger rise in his chest. Humans. The room was full of humans. Vexthar had heard about humans before they joined the Galactic Coalition. They were the newest species to enter the war against the Ravagers. Other races whispered that humans were weak. They cried too easily. They cared too much about individual lives. Real warriors did not behave that way. Real warriors, like the Krillians, understood that death in battle was the highest honor. A young human female approached his bed. She wore a white coat with strange symbols on it. Her hair was dark and pulled back from her face. She smiled at him, which confused Vexthar. Why would she smile at a wounded enemy species? "Commander Vexthar," she said in perfect Krillian language. "I'm Dr. Hana. I've been taking care of you for the past 3 days. How are you feeling?" "I do not need a human doctor," Vexthar growled. His voice was weak, and he hated how it sounded. "Where are my people?" Dr. Hana did not seem upset by his words. She checked the machines next to his bed. "Your people were notified. They said you could recover here since this was the closest medical station. You were very badly injured. We almost lost you." Vexthar looked away. The idea that humans had saved his life felt shameful. Warriors were supposed to die with honor on the battlefield, not be rescued by soft-hearted creatures who knew nothing about real combat. "I will recover quickly," he said. "Then I will leave this place." "That's good to hear," Dr. Hana replied. Her voice was gentle. "But recovery takes time. You'll need physical therapy. Your body needs to heal." She paused, then added, "I know this is difficult for you, but you're safe here. We'll take good care of you." After she left, Vexthar looked around the room more carefully. There were about 20 beds. Most held human soldiers. Some were missing limbs like him. Others had bandages covering terrible burns. A few lay very still, connected to many machines. The bed next to his held a young human male. Both of his legs were gone below the knee. Despite this, the human was sitting up, eating something from a small box. He noticed Vexthar looking at him and smiled. "Hey there, neighbor," the human said in broken Krillian. "I'm Taehyun. You've been asleep for days. Good to see you awake." Vexthar stared at him. This human had lost his legs. His military career was over. His life as a warrior was finished. Yet he sat there smiling and eating as if nothing was wrong. "Why are you happy?" Vexthar asked. "You are crippled. Your fighting days are done." Taehyun looked down at where his legs used to be. He shrugged. "Yeah, that's true. But I'm alive. My squad made it out. That's what matters." He held out the box he was eating from. "Want some?" "My family sent cookies. They're really good." "I do not eat human food," Vexthar said coldly. "Your loss?" Taehyun replied, still smiling. "They're chocolate chip. Best cookies in the galaxy." Over the next few days, Vexthar watched the humans carefully. He tried to understand them. Dr. Hana came by 3 times each day to check on him. She worked long hours, sometimes 16 hours without stopping. He saw her treat every patient the same way, whether they were human, Krillian, or any other species. She never showed favoritism, but he also saw something that disturbed him. One evening, a patient died. The human soldiers had worked hard to save him, but his injuries were too severe. After the doctors and nurses covered the body and took it away, Vexthar heard a sound from a small storage room nearby. Someone was crying. He dragged himself to the doorway, his remaining limbs shaking with effort. Through the small window, he saw Dr. Hana. She was sitting on the floor, her face in her hands, sobbing. Her whole body shook with grief. This confirmed what Vexthar believed about humans. They were too emotional, too weak. A proper doctor would accept that death was part of war. They would move on without this display of weakness. But then something strange happened. After only a few minutes, Dr. Hana stood up. She wiped her eyes. She took several deep breaths. When she walked out of the storage room, her face was calm and professional again. She went directly to another patient and began treating him with steady hands and a clear voice. Vexthar crawled back to his bed, confused. How could she cry like that, then return to work as if nothing happened? It made no sense. Taehyun had watched the whole thing. Dr. Hana works harder than anyone here, he said quietly. She feels every loss. Every patient who dies hurts her. But she never lets it stop her from helping others. That is weakness, Vexthar insisted. Warrior should not cry, is it? Taehyun asked. He looked at Vexthar with serious eyes. She feels everything we feel. All the pain, all the loss, and she still comes back every day to save lives. That takes more strength than I have. He paused. She saved you, you know. When you came in, 3 other doctors said you wouldn't make it. Dr. Hana worked on you for 11 hours straight. She refused to give up. Vexthar said nothing. He turned his face away and stared at the ceiling. That night he could not sleep. His mind kept returning to the image of Dr. Hana crying in the storage room. And then walking out to save more lives. Crying, then fighting to help others. Showing weakness, then showing strength. It made no sense. Humans made no sense, but they had saved him. This weak, emotional species had pulled him from the edge of death and brought him back. A human with tears in her eyes had given him a future. Vexthar closed his eyes and tried not to think about it. But the questions remained, nagging at him in the darkness. Maybe there was something about humans he did not understand. Maybe there was more to them than the rumors suggested. In the bed next to him, Taehyun hummed a soft song. Despite everything he had lost, the human sounded content. At peace. Vexthar had never felt peace, not even before he lost his limbs. Perhaps humans knew something that Krillians did not. The thought disturbed him more than anything else. 2 weeks passed in the hospital ward. Vexthar's body slowly healed. The doctors fitted him with temporary prosthetics for his missing limbs. Learning to walk again was frustrating and painful. He hated being weak. He hated needing help. Physical therapy took place in a large room with many machines and equipment. Vexthar was not the only one learning to use new limbs. Several human soldiers worked there every day, rebuilding their strength. One of them was a woman named Jisoo. She was older than most of the other soldiers, with short gray hair and scars across her face. She had been a sergeant in human special operations. A Ravager weapon had damaged her spine. Now she had to learn to walk again. Jisoo worked on the machine next to Vexthar most days. At first, neither of them spoke. But eventually, Jisoo started talking. She told stories about human military history while they exercised. "Did you know," she said one day, "that human medics in ancient wars wore special symbols, red crosses? It meant they only healed people. They didn't fight. And you know what? Most enemies wouldn't shoot at them. Even in the worst wars, most soldiers respected the healers." Vexthar found this hard to believe. "That is foolish. In war, you kill all enemies," Jisoo smiled. "Sometimes. But humans have always had rules for war. We created something called the Geneva Conventions. Rules about how to treat prisoners, how to treat wounded, how to treat civilians. We decided some things were wrong, even in war. Rules in war are for the weak," Vexthar said. He had heard this lesson many times in Krillian military training. "Maybe," Jisoo replied. "But here's something interesting. I once carried a wounded Ravager soldier 3 miles to safety. He had tried to kill me an hour earlier. But once he was wounded and helpless, he became my responsibility. That's what we're taught. Once someone stops being a threat, they're just another living being who needs help." Vexthar stopped his exercise. "You saved an enemy? Why?" "Because it was the right thing to do," Jisoo said simply. "Because if I become the kind of person who kills helpless enemies, then I'm not really human anymore. I'm just a monster who happens to be on the right side." These conversations confused Vexthar. Every day he heard similar stories from the human soldiers. They talked about comrades who died protecting enemies, about commanders who cried when they lost soldiers, then led the next battle with fierce determination. About rules and ethics and the cost of violence. Another human, Captain Daewon, often joined their therapy sessions. He had been a tactical officer before an explosion injured his legs and one arm. Despite his injuries, his mind was still sharp. He loved talking about military strategy. One afternoon, Daewon showed Vexthar videos on a datapad. "This is from the Battle of Kepler Station," he explained. "Watch this." The video showed human soldiers fighting Ravagers in close combat. The fighting was intense and brutal. But then Vexthar saw something strange. A Ravager vehicle caught fire. Human soldiers moved toward it. They pulled Ravager soldiers from the burning vehicle and dragged them to safety. Then they put out the fire and gave the wounded enemies medical treatment. "I do not understand," Vexthar said. Those Ravagers had just tried to kill your soldiers. Why save them? Because the battle was over for those specific enemies, Daewon replied. They were no longer threats. They were just injured beings in pain. We're trained to fight hard, but we're also trained to know when fighting stops and helping begins. This is weakness, Vexthar insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. Daewon looked at him seriously. Is it? Let me ask you something. Which takes more strength, killing a helpless enemy or saving them? Any fool can kick someone who's already down. It takes real strength to help them back up, especially when they were your enemy. Vexthar had no answer to that. Later, Daewon told him about human military training. Humans learned combat skills, yes, but they also learned ethics. They studied the laws of war. They trained to recognize when civilians were present. They practiced making difficult choices under pressure. We even learn about the psychological cost, Daewon explained. We're taught that war will change us, that killing will affect our minds. We're prepared for trauma, for guilt, for moral injury, and we're told that feeling these things doesn't make us weak. It makes us human. Vexthar thought about his own military training. Krillians learned to fight and to die with honor. Nothing else mattered. Soldiers who showed fear were executed. Soldiers who questioned orders were punished. The idea of learning about feelings or ethics in war seemed absurd. But then something happened that changed everything. Vexthar requested access to security footage from the battle where he was wounded. He wanted to see how he fell. He wanted to understand what happened. The medical staff gave him the recordings. He watched on a small screen in the recovery ward. The battle was chaos. Ravagers everywhere, explosions, screaming, death. Vexthar saw himself fighting bravely, cutting down enemies with his plasma blades. Then a Ravager weapon exploded near him. He fell, his limbs were torn away. He collapsed, bleeding and barely conscious. What happened next made Vexithar's chest feel tight. A human soldier ran toward him. It was Tae-hyun, still with both legs before his injury. Tae-hyun was carrying another wounded Krillian soldier. He dropped the soldier near cover, then ran back into the fighting. He grabbed a second wounded Krillian, then a third. The third was Vexthar. Tae-hyun lifted Vexthar onto his shoulders. Enemy fire rained around them. An explosion hit near them. That was when Tae-hyun lost his legs. The blast threw them both to the ground. But even wounded, even bleeding, Tae-hyun dragged Vexithar toward safety before other soldiers reached them. Vexithar turned off the video. His hands shook. His mind raced. Tae-hyun had saved him. This human, this supposedly weak creature, had run through enemy fire multiple times to save Krillian soldiers. And when wounded himself, Tae-hyun's first action was to make sure Vexithar reached safety. Vexithar looked across the room at Tae-hyun, who was talking to another patient and laughing about something. This human had sacrificed his leg, saving enemies he had never met. And now he sat there making jokes and sharing cookies, as if what he did was nothing special. For the first time in his life, Commander Vexithar felt something he had never experienced before. Shame. Not shame for being wounded. Not shame for losing limbs, shame for his own arrogance. He had thought humans were weak. He had believed they were inferior warriors. But Tae-hyun had shown more courage and honor in that battle than Vexthar had shown in his entire military career. That night, Vexthar could not sleep. He kept seeing the video in his mind, kept watching Tae-hyun run into danger to save strangers, kept seeing the exact moment when the young human lost his legs but still kept pulling Vexithar to safety. Jisoo had said something earlier that day. You're confusing compassion with weakness. They're not the same thing. Maybe she was right. Maybe Vexthar had been wrong about everything. Maybe humans understood something about war that Krillians had never learned. Vexthar became obsessed with understanding humans. He could not stop thinking about what he had seen. How could a species be so kind yet so effective in battle? How could they cry over the dead, then fight with such skill? Nothing about them made sense according to everything he had learned about warfare. He asked Dr. Hana for help. She seemed surprised by his request but agreed. She introduced him to Lieutenant Yoonji, a human military historian who had been injured in the same battle. Yoonji had lost an arm and now worked in the hospital's research section while recovering. You want to understand human military history? Yoonji asked when they met. That's a big subject. Where should we start? Start with why you fight, Vexthar said. Start with why your soldiers save enemies. Yoonji thought for a moment. All right, let me show you something. She led him to a computer terminal and pulled up historical records. Images appeared on the screen. Ancient Earth wars, battles from thousands of years ago, before humans even left their home planet. Humans have been fighting wars for our entire history, Yunji explained. We're very good at violence. Too good, actually. We nearly destroyed ourselves several times. Nuclear weapons, biological warfare, chemical attacks. We created terrible things. Then you are strong warriors, Vexthar said. No, Yunji replied. We were monsters. We killed millions of our own people. We burned cities. We poisoned land. We committed terrible crimes, she paused. But here's what makes humans different. After every terrible war, we said never again. We created rules. We built international laws. We tried to make war less awful. She showed him documents, treaties about weapons, rules about prisoners, laws protecting civilians, agreements about what was acceptable in war and what was not. Most species accept war as natural, Yunji continued. They fight until one side wins. But humans see war as a failure. We fight because we must, not because we want to. And even when we fight, we try to maintain our humanity. Over the following days, Vexthar studied everything Yunji showed him. He learned about human concepts he had never heard of before. Words that did not exist in Krillian language. Post-traumatic stress disorder, a condition where warriors' minds were damaged by what they experienced in battle. Survivor's guilt, the pain of living when comrades died. Moral injury, the deep wound caused by doing things that violated one's own ethics even if those things were necessary. Your soldiers get sick from fighting? Vexthar asked. Their minds break? Sometimes, Yunji admitted. War is traumatic. Killing changes people. Watching friends die changes people. We recognize this. We provide medical care for it, just like we treat physical wounds. Krillians do not have this problem, Vexthar said. But even as he spoke, he wondered if that was true. He thought of Krillian soldiers who became more violent after battles. Soldiers who could not sleep. Soldiers who eventually died in reckless attacks. Maybe Krillians did have these problems. Maybe they just killed anyone who showed symptoms. Dr. Hana joined them one afternoon. She brought someone with her. A young human soldier named Minho. He looked nervous. Minho agreed to talk to you, Dr. Hana said gently. He wanted you to understand something about human soldiers. Minho sat down slowly. He stared at his hands while he spoke. I was in my first real battle 3 months ago, he said quietly. I had trained for 2 years. I thought I was ready. But when the fighting started, when I actually had to kill someone, I froze. I just stood there. My hands shook. I couldn't do it. You are a coward, Vexthar said bluntly. Minho flinched but continued. Maybe, but my squad leader didn't leave me there. He covered for me. He got me to safety. After the battle, I expected punishment. In some military forces, I would have been executed for cowardice. That is correct, Vexthar agreed. But humans don't work that way, Minho said. I was sent to counseling. I talked to psychologists. I worked through my fear. And you know what they told me? They said it was normal to be afraid of killing, that having a conscience wasn't weakness, that taking life should be difficult. Then how do you fight? Vexthar demanded. I went back, Minho replied. After treatment, after training, I returned to combat. And this time I was ready. Not because I learned to ignore my conscience, but because I learned to carry it with me. I fight when I must. I protect my squad. But I also remember that every enemy was a living being. That weight, that awareness makes me a better soldier, not a worse one. Vexthar learned that Minho had later earned a medal. During a battle, he had saved a group of civilians while under heavy fire. He had also captured 3 enemy soldiers alive and protected them from other soldiers who wanted revenge. You were rewarded for showing mercy? Vexthar asked in disbelief. I was rewarded for doing my job with honor, Minho corrected. The mission was to secure the area, not to slaughter everyone. Protecting civilians and treating prisoners correctly is part of being a good soldier. That evening, Vexthar attended something he never expected to see. A human memorial service for soldiers who died in his battle. Jisoo invited him and he was curious enough to go. The room was full of human soldiers. Some wore formal uniforms. Others were in hospital clothes because they were too injured for regular uniforms. At the front of the room stood photos of the dead humans. Candles burned beside each photo. One by one, soldiers stood and spoke about their fallen comrades. They told funny stories. They shared memories. Many of them cried openly. Others put their arms around those who were crying, offering comfort. Vexithar watched these hardened warriors weep without shame. He saw them laugh through tears. He saw them support each other with obvious love. Then Captain Day One stood. He raised a glass. "To our fallen," he said. They gave everything. Everyone raised their glasses. "To the fallen," they repeated. But Day One was not finished. "And to the enemies who fought bravely," he added. "May they find peace." The room was silent for a moment. Then everyone raised their glasses again. "To the brave," they said. Vexthar felt like he could not breathe. These humans were honoring enemy soldiers. Enemies who had tried to kill them. Enemies who had succeeded in killing their friends. After the ceremony, he confronted Daiwan.
"Why did you honor our enemies?"
"Because they were brave," Daiwan replied simply. "They fought for what they believed was right. They died with courage. That deserves respect even if they were on the other side." "But they killed your people," Vexthar said. "Yes," Daiwan agreed. "And we killed theirs." "That's the tragedy of war. Good people die on both sides. We honor courage wherever we find it. We respect sacrifice even from enemies. Death is not our enemy, Vexthar. Dishonor is our enemy. Cruelty is our enemy. Forgetting the cost of war is our enemy." Vexthar returned to his bed that night with his mind spinning. Everything he thought he knew about warfare was wrong. Everything he believed about strength and weakness had been turned upside down. Humans cried, then fought. They showed mercy, then showed strength. They killed when necessary, then mourned what they had done. They honored enemies, then returned to battle. They were walking contradictions, living paradoxes, and somehow that made them the most effective warriors Vexithar had ever encountered. He looked at Tae-hyun sleeping in the next bed. This young human who smiled and shared cookies. This same human had run through fire to save strangers. Both were true. Both were real. That was the secret of human warriors. They never stopped being human, even in war. And that was exactly what made them so dangerous. The attack came without warning. Vexithar was in physical therapy when the alarm started blaring. Red lights flashed throughout the medical station. The calm, quiet building suddenly exploded into chaos. "Ravagers!" someone shouted. "Multiple ships! They're boarding us!" The medical station was not a military base. It was designed to heal, not to fight. Most of the patients were wounded soldiers still recovering. The security force was small. By every logical calculation, the station should have been evacuated immediately, with the most important personnel escaping first, but humans did not follow logical calculations. Dr. Hana appeared in the therapy room within seconds. Her face was calm, but Vexthar could see the determination in her eyes. "Everyone who can move, get to the emergency assembly point now. Those who cannot move will be carried. We're evacuating all patients." "All patients?" another doctor asked. "That's over 200 beings. We don't have time." "We have time if we work fast," Dr. Hana interrupted. "No one gets left behind." "That's not open for discussion." Vexthar watched in amazement as the human medical staff immediately began organizing. They did not argue about who was important enough to save. They did not debate the logic. They simply started moving patients. Explosions echoed through the station. The Ravagers were inside. Sergeant Jisoo appeared, limping badly but carrying a rifle. Her face was set in hard lines. Behind her came a group of wounded soldiers. Some were on crutches. Others were in wheelchairs. A few could barely walk, but all of them were armed. "Defensive positions," Jisoo barked. "We hold the medical wing. We protect the evacuation. Nobody breaks through us." Vexthar pulled himself up. His prosthetic limbs felt awkward and unfamiliar, but they worked well enough. "I will fight with you," he said. Jisoo looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "Welcome to the team. Take position by that corridor. Don't let anything through." The next hours were the longest of Vexthar's life. The Ravagers hit them hard. Wave after wave of enemies poured into the station. The human defenders fought from behind medical equipment, from doorways, from hallways. They were outnumbered and wounded, but they did not retreat. Vexithar fought alongside Tae-hyun, who operated weapon systems from his wheelchair with deadly accuracy. The young human's cheerful smile was gone, replaced by intense concentration. His hands moved across the controls with practiced skill, directing defensive fire with brilliant tactical precision. "Left corridor, 3 targets, Tae-hyun called out. "Vexithar, you have incoming from above." Vexithar fired where Tae-hyun indicated. 2 Ravagers fell. He was amazed at how effectively Tae-hyun directed the defense despite his injuries. The human's mind was as sharp as any tactical computer. Captain Dae-won commanded the defense with quiet authority. Despite his wounded arm and legs, he moved through the fighting positions, encouraging soldiers, adjusting tactics, and making split-second decisions that kept the Ravagers from breaking through. Hospital personnel status? Dae-won called into his communicator. Evacuation at 70%, came Dr. Hana's voice. We need more time. You'll get it, Dae-won promised. He turned to his makeshift squad. Hold position. No retreat. Vexthar saw something he had never witnessed before. These wounded human soldiers fought with a ferocity that rivaled any elite Krillian unit. But they never forgot why they were fighting. They maintained discipline. They followed rules of engagement. They protected each other with obvious care. When a young soldier panicked and started to break position, Dae-won was there immediately, his hand on the soldier's shoulder. Breathe, he said calmly. You're doing fine. Just keep breathing. I need you to hold this position. Can you do that for me? The young soldier nodded, steadied himself, and returned to fighting. Any Krillian officer would have struck a soldier who showed fear. But Dae-won's gentle encouragement was more effective than any punishment. The soldier fought harder after that moment of kindness. Then something happened that shocked Vexthar to his core. A section of wall exploded. Ravager soldiers poured through. The fight became close and brutal. The humans drove them back, but 3 Ravagers lay wounded in the corridor. They were still alive but could not fight. Standard procedure was clear. Ravagers never surrendered. They never showed mercy. They would kill you the moment they recovered. The only logical action was to eliminate them. But Dr. Hana appeared with 2 other medical staff. Get them to the medical bay, she ordered. They're enemies. Someone protested. They're wounded, Dr. Hana replied firmly. That makes them patients. Move them now. Vexthar stepped forward. This is insane. They will kill you when they can. Dr. Hana looked at him with those calm, determined eyes. The moment they stopped fighting, they stopped being enemies. They became patients. I don't abandon patients regardless of what species they are or what side they fought on. You are a fool, Vexthar said. Maybe, Dr. Hana agreed. But I'm a fool who keeps her promises. I swore to protect and heal. That oath doesn't have exceptions for enemies. The wounded Ravagers were moved to the medical bay, restrained but receiving treatment. Vexthar could not understand it. Could not accept it. But then the fighting intensified again and there was no time to think. Jisoo took a hit to her shoulder but kept fighting. Minho arrived with reinforcements from another section, his face pale but his hands steady. Yoonji worked communications with her 1 remaining arm, coordinating with evacuation ships and calling for help. The defense should have collapsed. By every military standard Vexthar knew, this wounded makeshift force should have been overrun within minutes, but the humans held. They held because they were not just fighting for themselves. They were fighting to protect the patients still being evacuated. They were fighting to protect Dr. Hana and the other medical staff. They were fighting for each other, and somewhere during that desperate battle, Vexthar realized he was fighting for the same reason. He was not fighting for glory, not fighting for honor or conquest. He was fighting to protect the vulnerable, fighting to give the medical staff time to save lives, fighting alongside humans who had shown him more honor and courage than his own people ever had. For the first time in his military career, Vexthar understood what humans meant when they said war was not natural. It felt wrong. It felt like a terrible necessity, not a glorious purpose. He wanted it to end, not to continue forever. This was what humans experienced in every battle. This burden, this awareness of cost, and yet they still fought when they had to. They still protected others. They still showed mercy to helpless enemies. That was true strength. When coalition reinforcements finally arrived, the medical station was damaged but intact. All patients had been evacuated successfully. The human defenders had held their positions despite overwhelming odds. Vexthar sat against a wall exhausted. His prosthetic limbs ached. His body hurt. But his mind was clear for the first time in his life. Tae-hyun wheeled over to him. The young human's face was tired, but he managed a small smile. You fought well, he said. You saved my life again, Vexthar replied. Your tactical direction kept me alive. That's what squad mates do, Tae-hyun said simply. We protect each other, Squad mates. Not Krillian and human. Not different species. Squad mates Dr. Hana walked past, covered in blood from treating wounded soldiers. She looked exhausted but stopped when she saw Vexthar. "How are you feeling?" "Alive," he said. "Thanks to you." "Thanks to all of you," she smiled. "That's our job." Then she continued on to treat more patients, including the wounded Ravagers. Vexthar watched her go and finally understood. Humans were not weak because they cared. They were unstoppable because they cared. 3 days after the battle, Vexthar received a message. The Galactic Coalition Command wanted him to testify about human military capabilities. His people, the Krillians, held significant influence over Coalition military policy. His words would carry weight. He spent the night before his testimony thinking carefully about what he would say. Part of him wanted to refuse, to say nothing. His own people would not understand what he had learned. They would see his changed perspective as weakness, maybe even betrayal. But he thought about Tai-Hyun sharing cookies despite his injuries. About Dr. Hana crying in a storage room then saving lives. About Jisoo carrying wounded enemies to safety. About Daewon honoring brave enemies. About Minho learning to carry his conscience into battle. About all of them fighting desperately to protect vulnerable patients. These humans had changed him. They had shown him something true about war and peace that he could not ignore. The testimony was held in a large chamber. Coalition officers from a dozen species sat in attendance. Vexthar stood before them, his prosthetic limbs steady now after weeks of therapy. "Commander Vexthar," the lead officer began, "you have spent significant time recovering among human military personnel. We ask for your assessment of their capabilities and their fitness for military service." Vexthar took a deep breath. "I came to the hospital believing humans were weak," he said clearly. "I had heard they cried too easily, that they cared too much about individual lives, that they were too emotional to be effective warriors." He paused. Several Krillian officers in the room nodded in agreement with this assessment. "I was wrong," Vexthar continued. "I was completely wrong." The room fell silent. "Humans do not see warfare as natural," Vexthar explained. "Most warrior species in this coalition see war as our true purpose. We fight because it is in our nature. We seek glory in battle. We honor death in combat. But humans are different." He thought carefully about his next words. "Humans see peace as their natural state. They see warfare as a tragic necessity. This perspective, which appears to be weakness, is actually their greatest strength." One of the Krillian officers stood. "How can viewing war as tragic make them strong? That is contradiction." "I thought the same thing," Vexthar admitted. "But consider this. A Krillian warrior fights until victory or death. We are brave and fierce. But a human fights until peace is possible, no matter how long that takes. They can endure wars that would break other species because they never lose sight of why they fight. They fight to protect, not to conquer. They fight to end conflict, not to perpetuate it." He pulled up images on the chamber's display screen. "Look at human military history. They have fought longer wars than any species in this coalition. Decades-long conflicts, century-long struggles, and they persist because they believe in the cause, not in the glory." Another officer interrupted. "But they show weakness. They cry, they mourn, they question their actions." "Yes," Vexthar agreed. "They experience what they call post-traumatic stress. Their minds are wounded by war. They feel guilt and grief. They carry the weight of every life they take. And you know what? They see this as evidence of their humanity, not as weakness." He let that sink in before continuing. "Humans have created something extraordinary. They train their soldiers in combat, yes, but they also train them in ethics, in the laws of war, in respect for enemies, in protection of civilians. They teach their warriors that some things are wrong, even in war. They prepare them for the psychological cost of violence." Vexthar looked directly at the Krillian officers. "We execute soldiers who show fear. We punish those who question orders. We kill any warrior whose mind breaks from combat. But humans understand that war wounds the mind as surely as it wounds the body, so they treat it. They heal it. They help their warriors carry the burden." He showed footage from the medical station battle. "This is what I witnessed. Wounded soldiers, some barely able to walk, fought desperately not for glory but to protect patients being evacuated. They maintained discipline and rules of engagement while outnumbered. They showed mercy to helpless enemies while under attack. They supported each other with obvious care and compassion. The chamber watched in silence as the footage played. After the battle, their doctor, Dr. Hana, treated the wounded Ravager prisoners with the same care she gave to Coalition soldiers. When I questioned this, she said something I will never forget. She said that once enemies stop fighting, they become patients, not threats. That her oath to heal does not have exceptions. Vexthar turned off the display. I have fought beside Krillian warriors my entire life. I have seen the greatest soldiers my people can produce, but I have never seen warriors more effective than these humans. Not because they are more violent or more skilled, but because they never forget the purpose of warfare. They fight to return to peace. He straightened his posture. Every other species in this coalition sees warfare as our natural state. We are warriors first and everything else second. Only humans see peace as their natural state and warfare as an aberration they must endure. This is why they can be terrifyingly effective in combat, while remaining compassionate in victory. They never lose themselves in war. They never forget they are fighting to protect, not to destroy. The chamber erupted in discussion. Some officers agreed. Others protested loudly. The Krillian officers looked particularly upset. The lead officer called for silence. Commander Vexthar, are you saying humans are superior warriors? No, Vexthar replied carefully. I am saying humans understand warfare in a way we do not. They understand that the true strength of a warrior is not in how eagerly they kill, but in how reluctantly they do so. They fight when they must, but they never stop being human, and that is what makes them remarkable. Later, back in the hospital, Vexthar learned that his testimony had caused significant discussion. The Krillian High Command officially condemned his statements. But younger officers, those who had fought alongside humans, started requesting transfers to human units. Vexthar himself requested a transfer. He wanted to continue serving alongside the humans who had taught him so much. 6 months later, he arrived at his new posting. He was fully recovered now, walking easily on his advanced prosthetics. As he entered the base, he saw familiar faces. Captain Daewon was his commanding officer. Sergeant Jisoo was his tactical advisor, and Dr. Hana was assigned to the unit's medical team. Tae-hyun was there too, working in communications. He had new prosthetic legs now and walked with only a slight limp. When he saw Vexthar, he grinned. Hey neighbor, ready to serve with the best squad in the galaxy? Vexthar felt something unfamiliar. Happiness, belonging, purpose. I am ready, he said. Dr. Hana approached him. She still had that gentle smile he remembered from the hospital. Welcome to the unit, Commander. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for everything, Vexthar said quietly. You saved my life. All of you. Not just my body, but my understanding of what it means to be a warrior. Well, now you can help save others, she replied. That's what we do here. We fight when we must. We protect always. We never forget why we serve. That evening, Vexthar stood with his new unit as they raised the human flag alongside the coalition banner. He looked at the human motto embroidered on their standards. He had seen it before but never understood it. Peace through strength, strength through compassion. Now he understood. True strength was not about how much damage you could inflict. It was about how much humanity you could maintain while doing difficult things. It was about fighting fiercely to protect others, while never forgetting that enemies were living beings too. It was about carrying the weight of violence without letting it destroy your soul. Humans cried, then fought. They showed mercy, then showed strength. They honored enemies, then returned to battle. They carried deep wounds from war, then healed and returned to protect others. They were warriors who never stopped being human, and that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Vexthar stood at attention as the flags rose. For the first time in his life, he understood what he was fighting for. Not for glory, not for honor or genetic superiority, but for the simple, profound purpose of protecting life and working toward peace. Tae-hyun stood beside him, no longer in a wheelchair, but on strong prosthetic legs. You know what's crazy? The young human said. A year ago, I never imagined we'd be serving together. Different species, different backgrounds, different everything. But here we are. Here we are, Vexthar agreed. Squadmates! Squadmates! Tae-hyun repeated, smiling. Dr. Hana joined them, along with Jisoo, Daewon, Yoonji, and Minho. They stood together as the flags reached the top of the poles. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the base. To fallen comrades, Daewon said softly. Human Krillian and all who died bravely. To the fallen, they all repeated. And to peace, Dr. Hana added. May we fight well enough to achieve it. To peace, they echoed. Bexathar felt tears forming in his eyes. Once he would have been ashamed of this. Once he would have seen it as weakness. But now he understood. These tears were not weakness. They were evidence that he still cared. That war had not destroyed his soul, that he remained capable of feeling compassion even after experiencing violence. He was learning to be like the humans, to carry his wounds, both physical and mental, without letting them define him.